What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and just a couple weeks ago, I made a video about a little bit of drama in the Warhammer 40k community. There was a large 40k event, the Lone Star Open, that had some misplays and cheating from an undefeated player who went playing an underrepresented faction. So they were under a lot of scrutiny, and the entire event went kind of viral within the 40k community. In the aftermath of that video, I talked to a lot of community members and tournament organizers and ended up getting in touch with Frontline Gaming, who I asked to jump onto an interview to give their perspective of the event from the judge and organizational standpoint, as well as discuss some ways that both Frontline Gaming and the Warhammer 40k competitive community as a whole can try to combat these kinds of misplays and cheating moving on into the future. So I sat down with the head of event management over at Frontline Gaming, Kicker Kalazdi.
Yeah, for Frontline Gaming, I am the events manager. I kind of spearhead, I guess, a lot of the admin stuff and the overall, negotiating with the venues and making sure there's toilet paper in the bathrooms and there's food and drink. Long story short, I've been playing Warhammer or been involved in the Warhammer world for like ever. And I saw the opportunity to join forces with Frontline Gaming, with Reese and Frankie, the owners. And when I realized there's an opportunity to make my passion a full-time job, I jumped aboard. So I come from a more traditional industry, far more boring, but pays way better, and joined Frontline Gaming to run their events.
Okay. As well as Adam Solis, the head judge for Frontline Gaming events.
My name's Adam Solis. I am the FLG head judge. I started playing actually Epic, back with first edition Epic in 89, 90.
Hell yeah.
I've been working with Frontline since the third LVO, which I think was 2016. But I've been judging events since basically early third edition, so since the early 2000s, essentially.
Adam can't sell himself so short. Like Adam is been with Frontline Gaming way before I was. Mm-hmm. He's been running events forever.
Okay.
And now that we've expanded, we've added Adam to start being, formally part of the team and jumping on to so many events. So a lot of judges, run other big events, but Adam's doing, a big event every other month.
Big thanks to those two for hopping onto the show to have a discussion about these issues and this particular situation. And I think we had a really good and cogent discussion about not only enforcement of rules at Frontline Gaming events, but also ways that the community can improve both at an event organizational standpoint and a player standpoint to try to prevent these situations from coming up in the future. Big thanks for watching the video. Please enjoy the interview, and I'll see you at the end. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can just sort of piggyback with that into getting into the questions. And this isn't going to be anything like super structured. So just to edificate myself, is there a team of FLG judges, or is it just Adam that jumps between events?
There's a group behind the curtain that helps. So we do have I'll just call it an inner core, and Adam, feel free to interrupt me, but we have an inner group of judges across the country that we heavily depend on to determine how we rule things or how we roll out the procedures. The only public face of that would be Adam, and he's also one of the only ones actually involved on in terms of being an employee of Frontline Gaming. But we do have a core, very private and trusted group that do help determine how we run our events in terms of the judging and the rules side of things.
Yeah, basically, I'm the face of the judge group. Like Kicker said, there's a team behind it that I talk with. Like I just described, they can't always make it to everything. Basically I'm the one that steps forward.
Are you pulling from pools of judges that are in different areas around the country that will then travel to the events? So you have sort of like a network, and you'll just then kind of amalgamate the people in a particular region to judge you for an event?
So we do try to have a staff judge. So that would be Adam primarily, but sometimes it'll be Adam and another guy, Keith, does a lot of times jumping on board, or one of the other judges that will travel with Adam. But we try to always have a local boots on the ground, because that gives local representation. It helps involve the local community. So we just did the Lone Star Open, where we had one of our staff judges there. Adam couldn't make it, so we had Jason there, and we had two regional guys from Texas that are regional community leaders that were the local judges helping run it.
Obviously, you mentioned the Lone Star Open, and that's sort of the reason that we're having this discussion today is, there was a situation that arose. Now, neither of you are actually at the event.
No, I go to every single event contractually.
Okay.
I have to be there for better or worse.
Remember, that's Kicker's full-time job.
Yeah. Okay, great.
My wife is extremely pregnant right now, and I had to leave her in all her pregnancy to go work the event, because that is my job.
Dedication right there.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. So, but I owe her a few spa days. But yeah, regardless of the situation, I'm going to be at every single event. Nobody that works at Frontline Gaming, whether full time or part time, does it because like we're trying to get rich. It's just that we're all really passionate community members, and we truly, truly love it. And to make this feasible, we have to be kind of scrappy, and that means that no matter what, I have to be at the event with my one other dude because that's it. There's only two of us. There's no backups to us, unfortunately.
So I just wanted to get sort of from the perspective, I guess, of the judge team of the situation that happened there, and just basically get the story from the
Yeah.
side of the organizers.
From what I understand, because I did talk to everybody. Well, there were a couple things. The player in question had his list wrong in terms of what he was playing compared to what was uploaded on the list. In addition to playing at least one rule wrong, if not two rules wrong, throughout the whole tournament.
Yeah, so all 6 rounds. This was a 6 round event. So
Yeah.
day one
it
and
was
day two.
it was not discovered until towards the end of the event. It was still during the event, and during the course of the event, the player had not acquired a yellow card previously. From what I understand, there had been some warnings in that, but no official yellow card was issued.
Were the
And,
warnings because of misplay, Adam? Because I was not aware. Or was it just warnings of character? Because there's two things, right? There's misplay and character, which you can get a yellow
I
card.
believe it was for character, but it was more like a verbal warning.
Okay.
So it wasn't in relation to the list or his misplay. Those weren't, at least from my understanding, weren't until again after the event had finished, but before people had left the event. So when that happened, we did discuss what to do about it, and in the end, the player had decided to just basically disqualify himself from the event. So he got pulled from the event. I believe he got 0 points if BCP did what they were supposed to do. Going forward, I know he will be getting special attention from the judge team. And part of the resolution was that he would be basically under watch for the next, or under probation for the next 12 months until after the next LSO if that player attends. And they'll be also start the tournament with a yellow card already. So the next infraction would be a red card. And depending on the situation, the severity, it could just be a red for that game, which is an automatic game loss, or it could be expulsion from the event.
According to what I was told, and obviously, this is, I guess, sort of anecdotal, but from people who were there, judges were informed before the event began of this player's sort of past conduct at other, not FLG events, but local circuit events. And that there was communication between the judges and one of his opponents after the first day of the event about some of the misplayed rules.
Trevi, I mean, there was actually several, six rounds, 6 opponents. I know 3 opponents did at one point speak up. The most important one to acknowledge is the person that spoke up after round 1 via an email that was sent. It was sent not to the head judge. It was sent to one of the local judges, which are absolutely wonderful. We love local judges, but it didn't go to the head judge. So already there was like, we can't expect some guy that's helping us out volunteering over the weekend to check his email. I think he did respond, but he didn't embrace or really handle the situation carefully. Lesson here, guys, is go in person and talk to one of the judges, ideally the head judge. There's always a Frontline Gaming head judge that can address, let's just be honest, a severe situation like this. Now, I was very disappointed that even though it went to an assistant judge, it should have been addressed better. This player does have a track record that's very extensive. I mean, I'm sure you can go back in time, and he's got a pretty bad reputation within the region that he plays in. So we are very much aware of this player. But we've also had this player go to, Adam, how many events would you say he's gone to of ours?
So the player in question has been to
at least 3 of our events.
I think every event.
Okay.
So far.
So I would say over 10 events then at this point in the past 3 years.
I'll say this year.
Okay, this year.
This year. So we're talking Cherokee, Rocky Mountain, ACO,
BAO,
and BAO. So in the 4 events he's been to, the 3 I was at, he was fine.
Yeah, and we were aware that he is he's got a reputation. So of course we monitor him, and we did not have any problem.
And he is aware of it.
Yeah.
At ACO especially, we got people actually complimenting him on the game they had with him, that they had an enjoyable game.
Seeing him make that change in his persona because people had played him previously. So whether we're being gamed, he's taking, he's like leading us on. Hey, look, I'm on my best behavior. And then all of a sudden he's going and changing at Texas. I'm not sure, right? I can't speak for that player. All we can see is what happened at our own events. There was no let's just call it what it is. There was no drama at any events going in to Texas. Frontline Gaming's in the weird position where we are, for better or worse, a professionally run business, and we have to try to make our decisions based off of experiences that we have firsthand. It's improper for us as a business to take third-party opinions, of I don't like that player, because as a business we can't make a decision that would impact one of our customers that is hearsay. It may be true, but once it happens at our events is when we can really lay down the law. So that's actually why moving forward with this particular player, he's now gotten the yellow card for the next 12 months, and we're obviously monitoring very closely. And I'm not trying to use an excuse. This is not an excuse. It's just a fact. It's a new addition. So things that, I don't play Tau. Adam, well, his particular army, I guess too late. I just said Tau. But, things can slip by. And I think that there was a little bit more grace in terms of some of the rules. And I'm not a judge, but I'm just assuming that some of the judges may not have picked up on all the misplays after 3 rounds, the first 3 rounds that happened that day, because it's a new edition. There's a lot of players having question marks and issues. And I guarantee 50% of the people playing at the Lone Star Open played something incorrectly during that tournament, just because it is a new edition. Mm-hmm. The problem was that by the time he started round 4, so the second day, we had been notified and nothing had been done to rectify this. And that's where the fault comes down on us. The round 6 opponent did have a terrible issue with this player. And with me, like I said, I'm not a judge, but after the event. So I was only brought in after the event had concluded. And then I heard the story from the player, that his opponent, the bad apple, as well as a couple other opponents, because then I wanted to go do my due diligence and talk to everyone he played to try to figure out what happened at this event, because I don't want this happening at other Frontline Gaming events. That's not okay with me. So the first thing, regardless of what event you're at, whether you're a Frontline Gaming event or another person's event, it's okay, people, to speak up if you think your player is doing something wrong. We have judges there. Go talk to a head judge. I see it all the time. People are always like, "Oh, I should have just I didn't say anything during the tournament." Well, say something during the tournament, because that's how we nip this in the bud, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first. The onus is initially on the player. If you feel like your opponent's doing something not proper, just call a judge. Let's figure it out real fast. It'll solve no issues, right? Had somebody said, "I don't think his list is right," we can just go look at his list real fast and try and figure that out. But instead, people are like, "I don't know, talk about it. I'll talk about it a Saturday night when everyone's already drinking or sleeping or getting ready for Sunday. Let's talk about it as soon as we can." Now, on our end, our Frontline Gaming's end, I spoke to the player after the event, and this was after we had all acknowledged, he admitted to our head judge before the award ceremony, he had admitted to our head judge and to his opponent that he had played rules incorrectly. He had played those rules incorrectly all 6 rounds. He also admitted that he was playing an unfair list. That's all that matters to me. So now the question is, this guy has gone 6 rounds and has won unfairly. And I asked him, this is after the event, I talked to him, well, you admit you just played 6 rounds and you won unfairly. And he goes, yeah, I didn't mean to. And it turns out this player was very focused on trying to tell people he wasn't cheating purposely, not intentfully, that he did it by accident. With me as the organizer of the event, I could care less if it's with intent or not. The point is that you played and you won unfairly. I could care less if it was cheating or not. The point is you won unfairly. And I can't speak for all games. I can't speak for all their organizers, but I can speak for myself and Frontline Gaming. At Frontline Gaming events, the generalized community is that, we're really solid. If you win with a broken list and you find it out after the fact, it doesn't mean even if you didn't do it intentfully. Most people have such amazing sportsmanship, they pull themselves out voluntarily. This player at Texas didn't process that was an option, or didn't choose to make that an option. Instead, was so busy trying to focus on defending himself that I feel like it did not work for him, because man, come on. So I did speak with him. I'm like, man, you can own up to the fact that you won unfairly and pull yourself out, or you can have the judges basically have this conversation with you. So the player then said, okay, well, I won unfairly, I should not win. I'm like, yeah, that's what you probably should have agreed to do when you first admitted you played an unfair list. You should have just pulled yourself out.
You mentioned previously that you didn't feel that Frontline Gaming could make decisions that could impact a customer, right? Prior to an event, right? So
outside of our event, right? Like if somebody cheats in another event, it puts us in a really awkward predicament to ban them from our event if they made an infraction in another person's event, because then we're trusting another person's opinion. on a player, and that gets really wishy-washy in any sort of business environment. Just because at the end of the day, we are business, right? Like we are a professional organization, and we are Nevada based. We have the right to refuse business to any customer, but I want to give everyone the opportunity, right? Like maybe I'm compassionate. I don't know what it is, but I want to give everyone a chance to come to our events.
Sure.
And if they screw up at our event, well, yeah, screw them. Don't come back to our events again. You know, I really maybe I'm too, and people have said this before. Maybe I'm too soft-handed, and so maybe I'm being too me personally. I'm too weak, but I really do want everyone to have an opportunity to either redeem themselves or at least come to our events and have a fair chance of playing our events without coming in with some baggage due to maybe a misstep that happened in their regional and tournament circuit.
Well, I guess the question is, they themselves, have misplayed. They've essentially, they've ruined the event for themselves, I guess, right?
And their opponents too, right? Like think about how that screws up the whole ranking of the entire damn tournament.
That becomes the issue, right? Because if these players are allowed to sort of continue to do whatever they want, even if it is a mistake and they have, they habitually make mistakes like that, they then impact the experience within your event for up to 6 people or even 8 people at some of the larger super majors, and then also, like you mentioned, the rankings suddenly get messed up. There are now losses tracked on other players' records that they may not should have been able to accrue, and so I think there's a ripple effect, right, of these kind
100%.
of actions taken on your events and impact potentially dozens of players' experience at an FLG event. Is there a value comparison there for Frontline?
You are 100% right, Trevi, right? At the end, like we have to look at the numbers, right? Is it one person versus the possible 8, 10, 12? I mean, the whole freaking tournament is impacted by one guy who screws up the ranking. So you're 100% correct, right? I agree 1,000%. It is a challenge, right? Because like I said, we do want to allow everyone to have a chance, right? An opportunity for redemption. Once we get burned at our events, that chance is extremely mitigated or removed entirely. I want to believe everyone's good and can change. And maybe that's a really weak side of me. Adam, do you think people can change for the good, or do you think we burn them at the stake and move on?
Like I mentioned before, I've been doing this for a while, and there have been instances in the past where players have been caught cheating. For anybody from the Midwest area would remember the Feast of Blades tournament series. At the very last Feast of Blades, the first and second place players both were caught cheating. I think the third place player won.
Everyone's just cheating. All right.
The first place player was found with dice that had two fives. The fives and the twos were made so they looked like fives.
Did he flush them down the toilet or afterwards?
No.
That's the thing. Even my wife, who doesn't know anything about 40K, is like, you flush your dice? Like, I'm like, how do you even know about this toilet dice thing?
His excuse was that he bought them off of eBay, and they were only found because one of the judges found the die under the table because it had fallen and went under the table. And the second place player had an illegal list. So the third place player eventually won.
That's great.
But
I think these players have a chance for redemption. Do you think that they will change
one
their
of them
ways?
did.
Okay.
The dice player did.
Okay.
And most people that do know who it is, and he's still active in the community.
Yeah.
He doesn't play competitive, but what he did was he took a couple years off. He didn't play at all, and then he slowly came back into tournaments and didn't really play to win the tournament, just played to play.
Yeah, that's cool.
The second place player. Oh, hold on. It's a tale of two players.
I want a positive note. Okay, fine.
Oh, then I should have started with the second
keep on going.
Because the second place player continued playing and just continued being the way he was, and eventually he quit because he just kept on getting banned from every venue and every event.
Yeah,
basically everywhere. So he finally took the hint and just stopped playing.
Okay, so we've got good characters and bad characters.
So that's a good example and a bad example
So,
of players that have been able to redeem themselves.
In my tenure, we've had one notable player that caused a lot of headaches for a lot of players, and he was removed from the ITC, told not to play. You can fill in the blanks. He did not come. Now he has since started going back to events, and he is. And I legitimately interviewed his opponents, right? Like, what was your experience? Just be honest. You're uncensored here. Just tell me straight up. And this guy has done a complete 180. He went from being one of the most hated, community members, wearing freaking camera and stuff to go play now, and now he's legitimately a wonderful player. Now, a good sportsman, he's nice. Yes, he will always have to try 10 times harder than his opponent to be a good sportsman because he is under the spotlight and he has that reputation that was a well-earned reputation, like he earned that reputation for better word. The point is that now he has changed. So there are people that have, and there are people that have. Luckily, I've got guys like Adam and other community leaders that watch local RTTs that keep their tabs on players, so that if it's somebody that we have to pull out, we pull them out. Like I said, it's happened twice so far that we had to do an all-out ban. But Trevi, what do you think? Do you think people should get an opportunity for redemption, or would you?
I think it's a question of, and this is a question for you guys too. We. Oh, hello. Oop, excuse me.
Hey, cat.
I'm just in the camera now, I guess. All right.
It's okay. We all need like cats in our life.
Now that 40k has really sort of exploded exponentially, and especially competitive and organized play, Warhammer is so much bigger now than it was in the past. Whether or not we can pull the perspective back from these specific players that are making these decisions for themselves, giving these players multiple chances to redeem themselves and just sort of seeing how it goes, then I think presents this incentive for other players to kind of try their luck. I wonder if heading that off at the pass, right, and nipping it in the bud, and presenting this more hardline approach to misplays can then prevent the problem from happening more in the future. So as we start breaking these larger events, we're you guys especially, and over in the UK, right, we're breaking 200 player events on a monthly basis, more often than that. LVO, right, broke 1,000 last year, right?
Sold 1,200 tickets already for 2020.
Right.
I mean,
so
huge,
so these events are going to start to get larger and larger and larger. I think the onus on the judges is going to get extreme, especially if they now have to track more and more players who are exhibiting these problems.
Yeah.
And especially as, clout, prize pools, potentially there's, players now selling coaching services and there's an incentive to do well in 40k, right? Which can incentivize people to act irresponsibly. I wonder if it presents a better face of the community if there can be a stance taken against this kind of play, that it is not allowed. And if you try it, there will be consequences. And you can kind of, I guess the 50% of players, the number one Feast of Blades player versus the number two Feast of Blades player, while would be unfortunate to lose those players, I think, in the grand scheme of things, versus these players that then have these ripple effects on events and can change the experience for dozens and dozens of people. Is that worth, potentially losing those 50% of the bad apples that can then maybe be recovered?
So it is a monumental task, right? There's a lot, right? You're right. If we have all these bad apples, like you're saying, and we're just trying to have the onus on the judges to try to babysit them during events, that's not realistic. We have a few things in our favor, which I've seen, and I've, especially in the past 3 years, that is extraordinarily powerful, and it's this real groundswell that's coming from leaders like Box and with the Vanguard Tactics, or Team XBZ, Steven, where you have this like creating of the social norm of the sportsmanship, this true sportsmanship, which does change the social norms at an event. So that I do think that if people play and are caught playing unfairly for whatever reason, people generally do the right thing. So I think that minimizes the potential for active cheaters, just because the social norms dictate that. Are we going to get these snakes that are going to try to infiltrate the community and try to win at all costs? Yeah, I guess you're right. So maybe we do have to be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe that's something we discuss in, I don't know if you have a chat or something like that, but I'd love to hear what your audience thinks. Like how harsh do we get for first-time infractors? Like what should be the penalty is? Because we are literally, guys, we're living in the world right now. We can frontline gaming is flexible. We can adjust. We can adapt. We can figure out if we want to have a permanent record, and people have a track record where it's a public list. Now, do we want to public shame people and say, hey, you're now on this blacklist and everyone knows that you cheated our event, take it this as you want? I personally have been trying to go with less of a public shaming mentality. We don't need witch hunts as much. I know Frontline Gaming, the owners, Reese and Frankie, really don't like witch hunts, and I support that. So when we do have players, because we do get players that get red cards, we do get players that get yellow cards, but we don't as a company, as an organization putting events on, we're really intentful without trying to focus on that negativity because we don't want to bring the community down. We don't want to focus on these bad apples. They got penalized like we didn't make a big public statement that this character at Lone Star Open has been basically getting a yellow flag at every one of our events, a yellow card at every one of our events and whatnot. We don't want to make that the focus because I think as a whole it's not good for the community. But we are taking a stand. I think that it would be interesting though if we maybe revisited the idea of possibly tracking players. Like,
I'm going to be honest, I'm actually surprised to hear that you don't have any sort of infraction tracking.
Public. We don't have a public, right? We have a block.
So the question is, would you rather have would you want a public track?
A public track, yeah.
Right.
It's all behind,
I don't think that it's necessary that it becomes public, and I do think that is, that's a philosophical question for people to ask themselves whether or not someone's hobby and infractions within that hobby should follow them into the real life. Potentially, if you Google search the name and find them on a document somewhere, and I don't know if that's necessarily as important a question as whether or not there is a record that then their conduct at an event reflects on, even if it's kept internally, right? As long as that's acted on, then infractions become less of a resource for a player to use and more of a punishment, I guess, against people who are trying to game the system and get away with it multiple times. Now, obviously, I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a vast minority of people. But like I said, I think that there is the potential that, as the size of the community increases, the number of those people is also likely to increase.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that, man, because the community is only growing. And also, 40K kind of sets the precedent in other communities, too. So what we do in 40K is going to probably impact Age of Sigmar, which is growing tremendously, right? And possibly lead over to Legion and Kill Team and Middle-earth strategy battle game, right? We want to set the cultural norms, the social norms, the expectations now. Internal documents are great. I think that we really do need to figure out, though, how do we nip that immediately, right? Because you're right, that can get. You really enlightened me, right, by saying, hey, if one guy sees somebody getting away with it, just a slap on the wrist, the next guy's going to get away with, and that's true, right? That is true. I do hope that the power of the positivity and the sportsmanship can outweigh those few assholes. I'm sorry to curse, but but at the end of the day, you're right. We risk all that?
Yeah. I guess the other question for you too, right, is that at a frontline gaming event, you are ostensibly selling an experience to a player, right?
Yeah.
If this player comes to an event and has this experience, right, making sure that these interactions don't happen, I feel like is a responsibility that you guys have, and less putting it on the players and less putting it on telling them that, you should have good sportsmanship. Of course they should, but also if a frontline gaming event has an atmosphere that can allow somebody like that to continue to do what they do, then I don't think it's fair that the onus is entirely on the participants of a tournament.
Well, the onus isn't completely on the player, though. So part of the procedure, once a player or a known player is at our events, is basically we don't assign a judge to their table, but there's a lot of traffic around their table, coincidentally. And depending on the player, there'll be times where we will talk to that person's opponent after their game, and a lot of times it's just nothing. They're like, they had a fine game and nothing really. Other times they'll talk to us, and then we have to go talk to that player, and like Kicker said, we don't normally publicize what happens, and sometimes they'll either have some type of penalty, maybe a points penalty. In most cases, maybe it will be a disqualification for that game that round loss. And quickly circling back to the keeping track, and because this kind of plays part into it, is what I have found in my experience. When people know that someone already has a yellow, or is close to has a yellow and will get a red card and they'll win the game. I've seen players who you thought were nice all of a sudden try to bait their opponent so that they get the second yellow card.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Wow. And Adam, not even just to bait them to take advantage of that situation, try to get them removed from the tournament, but also just purely priming people. If a person, if you have a judge watching this bad actor the entire event, everyone knows this guy's a bad guy. The opponent's going to go into that game primed, thinking my opponent's going to be an asshole. This game's going to suck. I'm not going to have fun. I'm going to have to call him out on every single rule. So, yeah, you probably do need to cover your butt by going into that game being prepared, but at the same time, I don't want somebody to go into an event with potentially a guy that's on the up and up and be primed to just have a miserable experience. So it is this double-edged sword here. I think the internal watch list and the way Adam and his judges intentfully have done, where they're monitoring, but they're not standing there right there making it socially awkward for quite a few people, but also
we
just
will if we have to, and we've done it
yeah.
in the past. But
Yeah, but that's like the ultimatum, right? I mean, that's definitely not.
it's a waste of resources, of the limited resources we have for an event.
Right. Now, sort of piggybacking on that statement, I don't know how many of these, I guess, sort of watched players there are at an event, but does that method of, I guess, of like orbiting judges then present stresses for the judge team at an event, and especially if there tensions or problems for the judge team being able to cover an entire event?
It does. It doesn't happen as much since 8th edition.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God. It used to happen a lot in 7th, especially in regards to templates.
Oh, sure.
But
fun. Those are fun, yeah.
But since 8th edition, it doesn't happen on quite the scale it used to. But it still happens, whether it's contentious or just it's usually because they're two good players are really, really, really contentious. But it does add that extra level of stress, especially as the events get larger and resources maybe are not enough to cover or barely enough to cover. It's like when you're at your job and your coworkers call out sick.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same thing. Because I have to assign a judge to a table and just watch that table, they can't walk around and answer questions. It's harder for someone to take like a bathroom break or something, or if they do, it's hard to cover their area. Mm. So it just puts more stress on the rest of the judges to be available and to answer questions, especially when there's it's within like 6 months of a new edition, especially with the new codex, when the codexes start dropping.
Right. And with that all being said, also when the event has higher stakes, the LVO versus the LSO. LSO is a nice small regional event, but the LVO, you have people that are, there's higher stakes. People want to really, really win that. You're more likely to have issues. We also have players coming from around the world where there could be miscommunication due to different social norms in different communities and rules, with intent, without intent, or purely, verbal communication issues, right? We do have way more judges at LVO with this all in mind. LVO, we have many more judges than we normally have at a small regional. I mean, Texas, we had 3 judges, right? 3 full-time guys. Right. But, I think what's something that needs to be addressed here, because you mentioned this and it's been really resonating with me, was the ripple effect of one, character in damaging other people's experience at our events. Our round 6 opponent at LSO, so the opponent that played the misplayer, if you want to call that, I spoke to him on Wednesday after the event. Had that guy had gone at that point 5-0. He was ready to win it, man. He was ready to go all the way. This event, the Lone Star Open was in you're in contention for one of the GW World's invites, and Frontline Gaming tickets are all expense paid, your flight, your lodging, of course the event ticket. So this guy was stoked, and I mean he'd gone 5-0. He had a crazy story of flying in and missing a model and having to go build it and paint it at the bar the night before, and I mean just a crazy hero's journey. And here he is. And he lost his round 6 game because somebody played unfairly. He reached out to one of our judges, felt a little upset, and I said, "Hey, let's talk." He basically, at the end of the day, when we pulled out this other player, he went 6-0 at a major event with a beautiful army, with a crazy story, and he, I felt really bad. So I pulled some strings to make sure that he was able to. He theoretically could have won the event, or at least come in second. We know he came in second at the bare minimum. At the worst, he came in second place because we had 2 undefeated, right, Adam? We had 2 undefeated or 3 undefeated?
It was 3.
3, but he was definitely.
3, but he would have got second. There was no way he was going to catch Ben.
Yeah. So he definitely would have come in at least second place. And like this guy, he really, really, really worked for it. I don't feel comfortable going into the complete details, but we go above and beyond to try and make things right for our players when these issues do happen. Can we do that all the time? Hell no. But I have some friends at Games Workshop that were able to help my player there that came to our event. But you're right. How do we avoid this from happening from the very beginning is constantly the problem. How do we avoid that happening from the beginning? Have you seen? And both you guys tell me. Have you seen the situation get better or worse? I mean, I know that at one point, 6th edition, 7th edition, it was a really messy world we lived in. But I feel like in 8th and ninth and hopefully 10th, we're seeing less issues. But what do you see, Trey? I don't know how long you've been playing this game, man, but have you seen there be less cheaters?
Yeah, so I played Warhammer when I was a kid,
Okay,
and I
cool.
bounced around other games. I started back in kind of the end of 8th edition, and I do remember in my sort of, I guess, intermission time that I
Yeah.
hadn't been playing 40k, but I was still involved in the tabletop game community. 40k had just a dumpster fire reputation.
Yeah.
So when I
Did you play
jumped,
War Machine? Like a lot of
I
guys
played
played
War
War.
Machine. I played War
Yeah, me
Machine,
too.
and
Air
it was
5. All right. Like we all went, we all played War
yeah,
Machine.
Mark II War Machine was
We'll
like
talk about
sort of
dead games.
where I cut my teeth. Yeah.
Yeah,
And it was going back into 40k and 8th edition. Like I think at one point you made mention sort of being prepared to, when you play against somebody with a yellow card, like sort of being prepared to like nitpick. And I remember I was like so ready to do that in 40k because I knew that the rules were a dumpster fire. When I got into it, I listened to a Next Level Painting, I think, podcast. They mentioned that one of the key skills you can have for competing in 40k was a good debate skills.
Oh no, you see, oh my God, don't say that. But that's true. That's true. But that's not what this game's about.
It was true, I think, and
we're not
I think
supposed to be
like
lawyers. We're strategists.
terrible.
We're generals. We're not
Terrible.
lawyers.
Yeah. So, and I think that the game has improved so much in the last, over the last 2 editions. That, you used to have these problems in 8th edition, and I made tons more videos about this stuff in 8th edition than I ever did in 9th or 10th. And I think the improvement of the rules helps a ton. And I think also the more important thing, in my opinion, is the access to game information. And I know it's like sort of a hairy subject. There are tools online that allow players to reference information now, model statistics, army rules, stratagems more easily than we'd ever had before. And I think that allows players on the fly to ensure that this stuff doesn't happen.
Amazing. Dude, amazing point. We're not trying to put index cards or the app, but that's such a valuable resource now for us as organizers. Because like, hey, you can ask your opponent to give you the stats like right there and then. Like, there's no delay.
Like, the app has been huge. Now with the app sort of then retreating back into this codex system, I'm a little bit worried that we get to the return of this like sort of dark age where players can't then vet their opponent's mechanics on the fly. We'll see how it goes, but I do think that those the improvement of the rules, the easier access to knowledge have definitely helped a lot.
No,
it was 7th edition was pretty bad towards the end. Unfortunately, because I actually enjoyed 7th edition until formations came out, but it's an old topic. So but the change to 8th edition and now 9th and 10th, because it's more or less that same core in terms of the rules, and the addition of the code of conduct, I think, helped curtail a lot of the cheating and the misplays and the bad actors that we used to have. Yeah, we still have them. I think you're always going to have them. It's just one of those things.
Kira, I think you mentioned that there was some communication for Frontline when the resolution to the situation at Lone Star Open was finally resolved. I know there was, I think on the blog, right? There was a short statement that was posted.
It was a little vague though.
Right. And I do wonder if, something that could potentially be considered is within the effort of trying to head off these bad actors, a more open communication is a powerful tool in the toolbox of the judge team and the events management team. Can then present this front that this conduct will be answered within your events, and then head off other players from
Yeah, and hopefully head off all the clickbaity, people always want to try to harp on this stuff. And maybe if we head it off in the beginning, like the day after the event, yes, this player had a red card, this is how it's handled, we move on with your lives. Drama is not that important anymore. That might be a really good option.
Save me the time making a YouTube video.
Save you the time making the YouTube videos. I'm sorry to waste your time. But you're right.
Part of that was because I wasn't there, and not because I said, to sound like pretentious or anything, but it's because I had to gather the information, because I like I said, I wasn't there to.
Right, you're playing a game of telephone at that point, right?
Yeah, basically. So otherwise, it would have been handled
There was a few in all transparency. There's a few mishaps that happened just on the procedural element, the way that we ran that at particular event. There's some hiccups. Nothing crucial, but definitely one of those was involving the situation. A lot of people do think that frontline gaming doesn't give a damn. Like we just let people slide, and that's not the case at all. We do, and that's the most unpleasant part of my job is having to involve that. And it's so unpleasant for me. I just don't want other people to have to deal with it. But I realize you're right. Maybe by keeping it so close to chest that people don't even realize what's actually happening.
Yeah, you may be creating that perception sort of unconsciously, even if the team still was strong enough to spawn lane.
Yeah, which is like, look at this, less learning here. This is great. I love it. This is super educational. I truly do value like this kind of input though, and I like dialogues, right? I love getting to focus groups or talking with different team communities. Like, hey, what can we do better? And this is a perfect example of that. Mm-hmm. I do have a question for you guys though, because you brought this up, and I know Adam hates when I bring this up, but I kind of have to do this because Trevi, I've never met you. I don't know your audience, but I'd be so damn curious to hear your opinion. You mentioned it briefly. Frontline gaming at this point really is you don't win an event because you want to get rich, right? We're not Magic, and that's very much intentional. Like that's with intent. We don't want the prize of LVO. I know Adam's like hating this. We don't want the cash prize for LVO to be $10,000 and a brand new car, right? Because that can start to incentivize the wrong people to play the game for the wrong reasons, right? All of us at Frontline Gaming, but we don't want it becoming Magic. We don't. We were going to do Magic tournaments at things like the LVO or the ACO, but people that go to play Magic in general are going there to work. They're going there to make money. Like that, it's a very different mindset. Well, people that go to a Frontline Gaming event, and I can't speak for other events because I don't feel proper, but people coming to play 40K at our events, they're going to have fun. Like, yeah, if you guys want to win it, but at the end of the day, the mindset is very different. And once you put a cash prize up there, it kind of changes that dynamic. I'm not opposed to it. I do understand that if we want to become the big leagues, we're probably, if we want to become the esports level, we might have to have that big old check given people. But what is your thought? Do you think we need a check, or can we get away with the glory of winning be the prize itself?
That's sort of entirely the decision of the event to make. I do agree with you. I think generally speaking, getting a prize at the end of the day is nice, but I go because I want to get the W's, right? Like I think I care more about the personal record than I do the actual money. And especially given that, I can't imagine for an event, and I don't want to put words or numbers in your mouth. Like I can't imagine that there's a huge margin on event running, especially for 40K, where the space requirements are so enormous. I can't imagine that it's this huge amount of money, and the amount of time spent to achieve that as a player to get to that undefeated record is enormous, right? You have to travel, you have to practice, you have to play, tons and tons and tons of games of Warhammer. You have to assemble an army, you have to paint an army, and all of that together, comes down to way less than any event prize could possibly recoup.
100%.
I think it's different for Magic, where there's not really that much there's not as much of a time investment, right? Like you assemble a deck and then you have a deck and you practice it and then you're good. But I think it's different for miniature games. So I don't think that a huge cash prize is like super necessary. But what I do mean is that I think that there are other financial incentives to performing well at 40K events now versus, a couple of years ago. Whereas, these players are now getting on teams that are sponsored. These players are, selling coaching services and subscription services and battle report channels and things like that they can then advertise based on their high placement. And so I do think that even if there isn't a crash prize to an event, if it's a large event with a lot of prestige, there is still going to be a check at the end of the day for some people, even if it's not presented by the event itself.
No, good point.
And I think a lot of times, like for right now, that might be a very small amount, but like we said, this community is growing exponentially, and I think that that's just going to become more and more prevalent as the process continues.
No, you're 100% right. We're in this weird growth stage where we're trying to figure out, do we make a professional league? Like, do we make what what is the LVO next prize? I mean, we have gone from little trophy cups to nice giant chain swords and power weapons, like we have grown in some ways, but it's like, what is the next step for us? What do we do to keep growing? Because you're right. I look at the numbers. That's literally my full-time job. 40K is growing. Age of Sigmar is growing. All these events are growing. People are so, especially post-COVID, people are all like just jumping back onto events now, and they're all growing. We're starting to have a huge gap between the players that take it super, super seriously and the ones that are just there to have fun. So it's like, as that gap grows, do we have to make two different circuits and then have a really different prize for one, and because those guys are there to win versus another prize. Like it's constantly this thing that's on my mind, and there is no right answer yet. But that's that, we watch, we learn, we see what you guys say, we hear what the players want, and we try to pivot towards that. Adam, I know you're not in the mood for a pro league circuit or anything like that yet, are you?
If it gives me more money, then yeah.
Oh, that's a great answer. Sure.
As a judge, not a player.
Right.
As a judge. Do we need more?
Because, well, I'll answer the money part first, or
Okay.
the professional league, because it's a really quick answer. Personally, I think I'm with it. So a few years back, John, who's one of the other judges for LVO, and he's also a GW judge, had written an article for Frontline regarding how you can't turn 40K into that pro level esports level. You just can't. So if people want to read about it, it's I believe it's you just have to look for Salty John, his articles, and you could probably find it. And I kind of agree with it. It's just too. Unlike Magic, like we just mentioned, it takes up too much space. If you want something like LVO where you have like 1,500, 2,000 people, playing, if you separate it to a pro circuit, then maybe.
Yeah. But you're right. There's a lot.
You're limiting it just to that pro circuit.
Like we think of 40K as big, and I'm just trying to be honest with you guys. Like, I mean, like, because I come from a different industry. Like, we think of this 40K industry as massive, and it's really pretty small. Like esports can afford these crazy prize packages because it's like we're talking like comically large numbers comparison to what we have. So it's like we're big, but we're really not that big yet. So I don't know if that's like just the number of participants, if we're ever going to get to that point where we have the eyeballs that are going to watch an esports thing and then pay for sponsors to want to give in these thousands and thousands.
That's the other thing. I mean, in all honesty, 40K is more or less boring to watch.
Yeah.
To watch. Not to play. Not to play, but to watch. It can be, and especially if you don't know what's going on, you're just like, what are these guys doing? The other thing I think I briefly mentioned in regards to the judges in relation to the size of the events, the ideal ratio is usually one judge per 50 players, and I say ideal because not very many events can do that. And that is also depends upon how many people actually is the event paying them, or are they just volunteers? I mean, everyone's volunteer, but do they get a little extra or something? And if you're giving them something extra, then that comes out of your budget for the event. Let's LVL, for example. Let's say there's 1,000. Ideally, you would want about 20 people.
Yeah.
Now, where are you going to find 20 people that will be, willing to basically take almost a whole week?
Yeah, right.
And their own dime to get there.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Because as much as people, as Kicker said, as much as people think that Frontline's just giant company, it's really not. It's literally like maybe 10 people at most.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we got 30. We got a warehouse, so but the events team is
so
like
13.
Okay,
13 people.
13. Oh my god! But like we're it is a you have to be efficient, right?
It's not,
you don't
it's not
get in this industry to get rich, right, guys? Like the margins on the events are tight. Just to make it successful, our risk is tremendous, like absolutely tremendous. And one of my jobs I was hired for is to like, hey, let's minimize our risk and maximize our opportunity for our margins, which is what I've been trying to do. But it is a challenge. It's far more challenging than any other industry, just because think how many people we have to fill up that space of the LVO, right? We may have 7,000, 8,000 people for the LVO, but that amount of space is meant for 80,000 people, right? Like it's just like the numbers are just so against us. But we make it work. So yeah, cutting. I don't use the word cutting corners, but sacrificing the fact that we can't pay to have 20 judges for a 50 person or 500 person event is unfortunately one of the realities that we face. But things like the app, where it's easy to look up your rules, makes it better. One thing that I've always kind of wondered, and maybe Trevi, maybe you have an opinion, maybe Adam, you have an opinion, but what if there was like some sort of formal judge training? I don't know. So like, certified seal of approval judges. I thought like that's something that probably needs to come from the top, come from GW or maybe like the ITC or the FLG.
No, that's a whole nother show.
That's a whole nother show. That's a whole nother thing. Okay, we're not opening up that can of worms.
It is a can of worms because I tried it a number of years ago before COVID, and
Yeah.
it was.
Well, I
Yeah,
didn't
I
know
won't
you
even.
then, so
I don't even want to talk about it right now.
Yeah, that's a tough question, I think, and it is a good one, but a lot of 40k's rules are as good as the rules have been becoming. There is a lot that's up to interpretation,
There's
and so
still,
I think
yeah,
a lot of it is like sort of, I guess, memorizing a particular community's take on something. I think
yeah.
ends up being a lot of like judge knowledge, which is kind of arbitrary. But I guess that is a good question. Moving into the future, if we're running larger events, and I think that the number of judges is becomes kind of strained. Is there a way that players or community members can be incentivized to become judges and
Yeah.
to volunteer for events or to work them?
that yeah. So I used to be, I used to do a lot of things. I used to also be the ref administrator for for soccer. So
Hmm.
that was part of the issue in gaining and retaining referees because they were usually volunteers, didn't pay them, and they would only do it just to get their bonus points for their child's division or whatever. For us, it was basically a free lunch.
Yeah.
So, and a uniform and some other stuff. For 40k, it really comes down to it has to start at the local level, the local FLGS or whoever's running the RTTs. They have to incentivize some. Like for me, I would get store credit, which is
Yeah.
most how most people get judges is hey, I'll give you store credit, you help me run this event. And for me, it was X amount of store credit dollars per person. So it incentivizes me to get as many people as possible to play at that store.
Yeah.
So it starts there. From there, you hear about other, as a judge, you hear about other events, or you see other, or as a player, you see other events, and you start going to them, and maybe you start, hey, if you need a judge, I can help out. I also judge at my local store, and that's how I got to judging LVO. Was Travis and I would run events at our local store that Reese and Frankie used to go to almost every month, because for them at the time they lived in Central California, so it was just a short drive. And once they felt that they needed someone else to run LVO, to judge LVO, because they had to run all these other events for LVO, we were the first people they asked because that's who they knew. And it's kind of the same way right now. If you want people to run bigger events, there's people you know and people you talk to, and you see them run events or you help them run events. You kind of know how they do things. And if you kind of like how they run their events, you think they know what they're doing. Then yeah, hey, you want to help me out with this bigger event, and then it just goes up from there. But the problem is a lot of people want to play. Like I said, it's more exciting to play the game than it is to
Yeah.
watch the game.
Mm.
Or
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy judging because it allows me to meet a lot more people than if I just play. But there is the administrative side of it that can get very tedious and because sometimes very frustrating that you have to deal with, especially if you're doing the larger events. So it's really tough to get people to want to judge. My suggestion, and it's the same for soccer, if you want to be a better player, become a judge.
Oh, that's a good point. Wow.
Being a judge will make you a better player. Not because you'll know the rules, but because you'll understand how events are done, and you'll understand how rules interaction, and you'll come across rules you never even thought of, even if you think you know the rules inside out. There's always something that comes up, especially with a new edition.
Right.
That's solid advice.
And it
I like
also helps you learn other armies because a lot of people just stay with their one or two armies that they play. They don't have enough time, money, or I mean, not to be mean, but enough friends to have access to all the armies. And what judging helps you do, it helps you learn the other armies because now you have to know the interactions for all the armies.
Mm-hmm.
So my suggestion for everybody out there that complains about judging that thinks they know better is to actually, if they're not doing it, is to actually do it.
Right.
You become a better player, in my mind and from my experience.
That's an interesting point, I think, because it opens up another question of whether or not there's a way that there can be kind of a cross pollination of these players who are super enfranchised, very good both mechanically at the game and also knowledgeable about the rules, and having them cross over with the judge team.
I do think we need more judges, and I'm not sure how we get more of them, other than we just increase the ticket price. But I don't think anyone wants the ticket price going up too much, right? To pay for a bunch of judges. So So I think we try to stick to 1 to every 50 or every 75 at each of our events. That's kind of our ratio. And of course, our judges, I just say this with all heart. We have probably some of the best, if not the best judges in the country. Like they are amazing. So, but yeah, I mean, Trevor, you wouldn't go to an event and judge, would you? Like just, you want to go play, right? I
I
mean, it's too
mean,
much fun rolling dice.
well, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think I've been to a GT to play in almost 2 years at this
Oh, no
point.
way.
I usually go to GTs to live stream them.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm a big proponent of active judging, especially at top
Ah,
tables.
okay.
So I'll usually be streaming the top tables, and I'll have a discussion with the TOs beforehand, obviously, of sort of what I'm allowed to do, basically. But because I'm going to be sitting there at their undefeated tables and watching this game religiously for a couple of hours, um, I think that gives TOs a tool to ensure that those games go off with
Yeah.
as few hitches as possible. And I think that opens the question up to you guys. Like, what do you think about actively judging, especially the not necessarily like the number one table, because I know, as we talked about, like it's so difficult to get a single judge for two people. You
Yeah.
want them to be covering a larger area.
Right.
But like, what about the top 8 tables, the top 12 tables, something like that? Is that a consideration at FLG events where you'll assign a judge to scrutinize the undefeated players more than
We were
the
just
other ones?
talking about this because I know LVO seems like it's a lifetime away, but it's really just a few
Oh,
months
it's
away.
coming.
Yeah, it's coming, all right. So we were talking about the game plan for Sunday, which is when you have the top 8 play for the 40k champs, as well as a lot of the other game systems. And Adam, what was the final resolution? How many judges do we need for 8 people? We were talking about the 8 finals for 40k champs at LVO. What was
We usually start with one per table.
one per table? So 4 judges for 8 people at LVO. So that's one per table for the final cut. Now, generally at LVO, we'll have at least a few judges at those top tables. On Saturday when you get to those.
So yeah, so usually how it works is day one we kind of just walk around all together because the tables are usually unranked,
Mhm.
so they're kind of all over the place. Day two we rank the tables, so it's 1 through whatever is the ranking, and we ask certain judges depending on their experience and in our estimation to kind of patrol more of those tables more often, and we try to get more people watching those tables, and usually those tables are near the judges table to begin with. I think they were last year, so we try to have more judges available to them, but in all honesty they're usually not that problematic. They're usually able
Explain that, Adam,
to.
because I know that was a hard thing for me to grasp, but maybe Trevi and his audience would be interested because I don't understand why that is the case.
Yeah, so if you've ever watched even the stream games, if you ever watch two top players play, they're not super they're not like hyper competitive. They don't seem like it. I mean, they are, but they're very cordial to each other, friendly, bantering back and forth, talking back and forth. I mean, and for the most part, they have a good, very good, because they're at that level, knowledge of the game itself. So they know how everything's supposed to interact. They know about their opponent's list. They know how it's supposed to work. They know what it's supposed to do. So they kind of know what's going to happen if certain things happen. So if you do this, then here's what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen, and I lose or I win, or this is what I have to do in order to win. So they already know what they need to do, and so there's not too many questions from them. There's maybe a few when something weird comes up that maybe both of them haven't experienced. They know how the terrain works. They have very, very little, if any, questions about the terrain, or if any questions, it's usually about the mission. Um, and there might be something, but it doesn't come up very often. Um, it's really the mid tables and lower where there's still a lot of questions because people are still learning the game, or maybe they're getting better, but they don't have a full concept of what they want to do, or maybe they want to try something but they're not sure how it works in order to try it. Whereas the people up top, they just know everything in and out.
Now, do you think
Yes.
that there's a difference between, obviously the top 16, top 32 like shadow round players at LVO,
Hmm.
which is ostensibly probably the toughest competition in 40k, right? And the players who are at that point have to work so hard to get there. Like they're so incentivized to do well, and I think also be
Hmm.
um, just kind of be these community like upstanding community members. Uh, that I think I agree with you. That's probably less of a contentious situation than some of the smaller events, right? So like
Right.
we're discussing like Lone Star Open and some of these smaller super majors where you don't go to 9 rounds of 40k, so that the players at the very top are not explicitly like these top 8 ITC players, where they are less knowledgeable, less well known,
Yeah.
and maybe have more open questions, or they've never been in this situation before. Do you think that judging in those particular situations is almost more important?
Yes, but even though they're not more well known, there's still those players. So compared to the rest of the field, it's still less percentage wise. It may be more compared to LVO in terms of questions, but it's less. It's still less compared to the rest of the field for that event.
Mm-hmm.
So we still patrol the top tables, whether it's LSO, ACO, Cherokee, whatever, any of the other frontline events. We still patrol those top tables because we know there's going to be issues. But it's still not as many as the rest of the field. And for example, no, ACO had 9 rounds, so I had to stay at the top table. So I only had to stay at the top table. But there were a number of questions and issues that I had to correct during the finals of ACO.
Mm-hmm.
The lead up to that, during the when everyone was playing, not just the final 8, we did walk around those top tables more. But again, it was probably the same percentage of questions that we got there compared to the rest of the field than LVO. It's just LVO is just on a larger scale.
Yep.
But for ACO, LSO, all those the smaller FLG events, they're more pronounced because it's a smaller pool.
Yep.
That makes sense.
That sort of follows along to another question that I had. You mentioned a lot of sort of the proportion of questions that are asked of the judges.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that the 40K community in general, and you can correct me if you feel differently about this, that the 40K community hasn't really quite internalized yet, is that judges are a resource for answering those questions, right? And even in some of the comments that I've seen, sort of surrounding the Lone Star Open situation, where judge calls were sort of framed almost as like a punitive measure to players. We're like, well, if you don't agree with me, I'll kind of call a judge on you.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think that would go
Not wrong.
necessarily how you think. If that's your first if that's your first response to somebody disagreeing with you on a rule, I don't know if they're the bad guy there. So I think it's important for the community, and maybe this is something that can be communicated to players at events like this, that judges are this resource that players are meant to be able to draw on when either they have rules questions or they come into these situations where a player is like maybe misplaying something or is acting unsportsmanlike. So do you agree that there's like almost a little bit of a stigma against calling judges within the competitive community?
We need to make the concentrated effort to change the expectation, the norms around this, right? I mean, it should not be something you're afraid or embarrassed to do, to call a judge. And as the opponent, you don't take it as a personal slap in the face if someone calls the judge. It's just, we're playing the game, we're playing at a tournament setting. One of the things that we've tried to roll out at all of our events, which Adam's been doing, is having a pre-event kind of meeting, I guess, with the players. Now it gets harder to do based off of all the different game systems taking place and there being overlap. But in general, we're trying to embrace this from what we've seen in the Legion, the Star Wars Legion community. They do an amazing job, regardless of where in the world or where in the country we're playing. They always do a pre-event chat just to kind of set the tone for the entire event, and it's amazing. And basically one of the things they address is, hey guys, it's okay, call the judge. It's not a slight on your opponent, it's just you're calling a judge, you're getting the rule clarification, and they don't have this issue because it's become such a social norm. So that's something that not just frontline gaming judges, but all TOs, all organizers should just say, hey guys, at the beginning of your event, let's tell your players it's okay to call a judge. No, it's nothing personal. It's just calling a judge and making sure things are taken care of. Adam, I mean, have you ever had anyone like come back to you after the fact saying, "Oh, I mean, I was embarrassed to call you"?
It happens after every event.
Yeah,
I get a message or I get an email, or they come up to me afterwards and talk to me about the situation, and the initial response was, did you call a judge? And they usually say no. And even in comments after events that I've read in different sites, it's always, they talk about their event and they didn't call a judge over, and it is a stigma And that's a carryover from like almost like the old GW days from like
Yes, the old.
20
This
years.
is just a friendly game, beer and pretzels. It's not competitive.
Yeah.
No.
So GW likes to present the game as basically beer and pretzels, which is
Yeah.
to me the most complex beer and pretzels game I've ever seen. So, and in such they promote what's called the spirit of the game, things like that. For a lot of people, calling a judge over or a figure of authority over almost flies into that spirit of the game because you're basically calling mom or dad over
Yeah.
because you feel you're not playing fair, which you should do if you think there's something's wrong or just something doesn't seem right. One is just check your opponent's rules. It's and in right now, anyway, we don't know how the app's going to go, but you can check them yourself.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
But
Ask to see the rules. Anyone that's played War Machine knows this.
yeah, you have your little cards.
You ask to see the rules. Now, especially, you ask to see the card and they show you the card. There's no excuse for someone to not have the card, at least on their phone.
And Trevi, we ask you from your angle, from your community, to maybe remind people, hey, like it's okay. I mean, obviously, don't go out of your way, but if you have the opportunity to remind people, yeah, guys, it's not weird, it's not mean, it's nothing
Yeah.
personal. You're just playing the game at a tournament, and judges are a perfectly normal part of that conversation. We are rolling out something new. We're going to try and test at LVO, which will be basically a text-based way to bring in a judge, which takes out one level of that, I guess let's call it awkwardness, which is something we're testing out. I don't want to promise anything till I know it works 100%. But how cool would that be if you pull out your phone and you get to text our head judge table to either send a judge your way or to answer a question really fast?
It's not going to be my personal number, so don't.
Yeah, not going to be personal. Yeah, no.
But the part of the hurdle, one of the hurdles is just getting over that stigma. People say stuff like, "Oh, why don't you just call a judge?" That's they usually stand by. Yeah, that's because that's what you should be doing. That's why we keep on saying it, because nobody's doing it.
Yeah.
If people do it, then we don't have to keep on harping on it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's especially sort of, kind of reporting after the fact that's easy for like the armchair event goers to discuss is like judge calls, right? Whereas and I've experienced this before as well at events too, right? Like you're at an event, you're having a discussion with someone, and it's a crowded event, like it's sweaty. You know that if you're going to call a judge, it's going to be 5 minutes before they get there. Maybe the time's short. Maybe, like that's really when rules confusion gets kind of stressful. Is you're towards the end of the event. It might swing the game one way or another. You don't want to wait for somebody. But I think that it is so important for people to keep in mind that is the correct resolution to things, and like you said, there is very little that you can do to turn back time and repair a game state of a game that's already been cleaned up, right? So it's so important for people to call the judge in a timely basis as soon as they notice something. And that can if judges continue to get called to somebody to one player's table, then suddenly like they're on your radar, so they can prevent that from happening in the future. Like there's we talked about the negative ripple effect of somebody having these problems at an event, but there's also these positive ripple effects if discussions are wrapped up earlier, and even if somebody is they're misplaying a rule because they simply don't know, and a judge gets called in two different times to their event, to their table, suddenly they know the rule, right? And they're not going to get it wrong in the future, and all their other games are going to be great. So I think that there's this huge knock-on effect of resolving issues with the judge with an impartial third party that are so beneficial to the community, and it's important that the community recognizes that.
Yeah
100%.
For it, are there any statements that you guys want to make, or questions for me or for the community that you guys want to close out with?
I mean, if anybody has any questions or comments or whatever, other than YouTube, I do have I do have a podcast called TFG Radio, and although we do go off on tangents, it is basically three of the judges from LVO, myself, and then obviously the head judge for FLG, and also one of them is also a judge for GW. So you can listen to that, and we always talk about what's going on, and you can always email me at headjudge@frontlinegaming.org.
ORG. Yeah. ORG.
Yeah, ORG. If you have any questions, even if it's not outside of LVO or whatever,
Yeah, and Trevi, on behalf of myself and Adam and the whole Frontline Gaming team, thank you for having us on.
Yeah, for sure.
We are just a bunch of geeks that happen to do this, all the time, running these events. We are open books. Please reach out to us. We're just community members. We all, 40, all the Frontline Gaming guys, we still love rolling dice. And my personal goal, like personally, is to make this the best damn community I can, doing whatever I can through the Frontline Gaming avenue. So, if you got advice, don't be shy. Reach out. Events at frontlinegaming.org. That's my email. Find me on Facebook, whatever. See me at an event, give me a hug or whatever. I'm happy to shake your hand and talk to you and figure out how we can keep making these events
Don't hug
better
me.
and better.
I'm not a hugger.
You're not a hugger. Don't hug Adam. Don't hug. You can hug me. You can hug
You can
me.
hug me, but I'm not going to respond.
But yeah, no, thank you so much for having us. And like I said, I hope you guys feel comfortable enough to either ask for a judge or simply shoot us an email if you have questions. Like we're your friends. Also, hope to see you guys at events. We're there. We got events across the country. So frontlinegaming.org is the website too, if you guys want to go check out what we're doing.
Hell yeah. Yeah. And I want to thank you guys too, for, not only coming on and having this discussion. And I think it's been a really good discussion. Like I've got a lot of material to break down. And I think there's a lot of good information, both for people in the community in general, and also for people who are attending Frontline Gaming events and on how you guys, are going forward, are handling these situations and have been in the past. And I also want to thank you guys for, you basically like put yourselves in the crosshairs as much as there I'm sure is criticism of events and competitive play and stuff. Like at the end of the day, there wouldn't be 40k competitive play if it weren't for the ITC, and we wouldn't have these discussions if it weren't for Frontline Gaming running tournaments, right? So if there's no tournaments at all, we can't have tournament controversies.
Exactly.
so
and going into this, Trevi, like I was a little hesitant because I'm like, you know what, we just keep on doing what we do and let content creators just do what they want on their end. But like, Adam and I spoke and like, let's just give it a shot and be transparent. Like, there's nothing we have to hide. My bigger thing is I just don't want to focus on the negative because there's so many new players coming in and a lot of these guys are like, I hear it's a little rough or it's a Shark Tank or people. And I'm like, not really. The community is like, all my best friends are from this stupid community. Like, it's funny. All my friends have changed since I've joined this community. Like, I realize my old friendships are nothing compared to the friends I've made through Warhammer. And I'm like, wow, geez, I want more people to see this. So I'm always trying to lean into the good.
Right.
But yeah. And you've got me at my email. Don't if you ever need anything, dude, just reach out. Like, I'm happy to give you the inside scoop, what just happened and whatnot. Because there is shit that happens at every event, but it's sometimes not all the information's given out. Something I'm going to work on. I've learned that from doing this interview is, maybe I don't need to keep things so close to my chest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, and I try to say this every time that there is, any sort of drama that takes over the internet, that the proportion of players that are involved is so infinitesimally minuscule compared to the number of players playing at these events, right? There are 20,000 people in the ITC right now, right? Registered. And of them, there's like 3 people who might be, a little controversial. All right.
Sweet, guys.
Well, it sounds like you got to take off, so I'll let you go. But thank you guys so much for hopping on. I think this discussion was awesome.
Cool. Sweet. Awesome, guys.
Great.
See ya.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Have a good one. So that was the interview with the Frontline Gaming team. Again, huge thanks to Kicker and Adam for coming on to the show. We ended up recording a couple hours of discussion, so this is a bit of a cut down interview for time, but I really appreciate both of them taking the time to talk to me. Please let me know down in the comment section what you think about Frontline Gaming's response to the situation, their potential changes to their policies in the future, and ways that you would like to see these rules reinforced moving on into the future. Big thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are wonderful and amazing and make long-form videos like this possible, so I really appreciate it. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.